Hi everyone, we'll continue our Search for Truth Home Bible Study lesson today, and today we are covering lesson 7, chart 2. Right, lesson 7, chart 2 covers mainly on what Christians call today about the Last Supper, right? The particular kind of like a practice that Christians celebrate known as the Last Supper. So let's look at this chart right now. Now there are two parts to the chart, right? The top part talking about the symbolism and what is symbolic about the Last Supper, right? And before we get there, let's talk about the event of the Last Supper itself. So the question is, what happened at the Last Supper? Right now, a few things happened during the particular um, Last Supper that Jesus had with his disciples, or the last meal, right? But the most important part of it is this, and let me read it for us. He said, "And he took bread, gave thanks, broke it, and gave it to them, saying, 'This is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me.' Likewise, he took the cup after supper, saying, 'This cup is the new covenant in my blood, which is shed for you.'" So as part of his last meal with the disciples, Jesus took the opportunity using this meal to let them know there's a new ceremony that he wants them to continue to celebrate after he has been after he's leaving there, so that they can remember the significance of what he's doing for them. And this is what he's saying, that take bread as a symbol of my body, right, which is broken for you, right, and then take a cup, right, with wine or with grape juice, right, and then take this cup as a symbol of my blood that is shed for you. Now let's go down to the significance and see how this is actually something that is aligned to what God has intended, or what God has been asking the Israelites to practice from years past. Right. What the Lord is really doing is making a new covenant, in this case, a covenant in blood. For those of us who are not familiar with the term covenant, a covenant is loosely translated as a binding contract. So it's not just a legal contract, but a contract that needs to be upheld, a contract that needs to be honored, right? And in the customs of the Middle East of that time, of that era, people who do not fulfill their end of the covenant literally pays in blood. In other words, they have to, blood has to be shed. In some way, some life has to be sacrificed if one party fails to keep their end of the covenant. So covenants are that important, right? It is, in today's terminology, some form of a legal contract. Now, if we consider the fact that when God told Abraham that he will make a covenant with Abraham, right? Abraham was supposed to demonstrate his commitment to the covenant through a certain physical sign. And this is what the Lord said to him. Say, "This is my covenant which you shall keep between me and your male descendants after you. Every male child among you shall be circumcised." So that's why the Israelites today, right, continue to practice circumcision, right? Because back then, their forefathers, Abraham, used circumcision as a sign of his covenant with God. And God says, "Because of this covenant that I have with you, you will be blessed, your nations shall be blessed, the nations among you and through you shall be blessed." Right? So for Abraham, the sign of this covenant, which obviously involves blood, because circumcision, that's this removal of foreskin, right? This is basically God's covenant with Abraham. Now, we know later on, as Moses led the children of Israel out of bondage, out of slavery in Egypt, right? This is what the Lord commanded them. "Every man shall take for himself a lamb. The congregation of Israel shall kill it at twilight, and they shall take some of the blood and put it on the doorpost, on the lintel of the house." Right. So they are supposed to sacrifice a lamb without any spot, without any blemish, so to speak, a perfect one, right? And the blood shall be smeared on the doorpost, right? And this Passover lamb is a lamb that is sacrificed on behalf of the people living in the household. And since then, since the times of Moses, the Israelites have always been celebrating this particular ceremony, this particular event, remembering that because of a lamb that was sacrificed for them, God's judgment passed over their household. So blood was shed on behalf of the people in the household, right? And as a result of the blood, God continued to protect the people. So when you look at what is being talked about in the Old Testament, right, then you begin to see why John the Baptist is saying that Jesus is the Passover lamb, because Jesus is coming to pay that sacrifice on our behalf. Right. So in Hebrews chapter 9, verse 22, it explains this: according to the law of Moses, nearly everything was purified with blood. Without the shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness. So what Jesus is using the Last Supper is to let them know that they are to keep a certain ceremony with symbols signifying this very important principle, that there will be a shedding of blood, but the shedding of blood is for the purpose of forgiveness. Put simply, Jesus is saying, right now, I'm preparing you to celebrate, I'm asking you to celebrate an event that will result in the shedding of blood that will bring about forgiveness for all mankind. And this allows you to enter into covenant with me. This is what Jesus is really saying, that every time you take this, every time you celebrate this Last Supper, you are remembering that you are in covenant with God. Right. So whenever people celebrate the Lord's Supper, as you can see in this picture here, there's a bit of looking backward, it's a bit of looking forward. For example, for us, right, I mean, we are living in a time right after Jesus. So each time we celebrate the Lord's Supper, we are looking backward. We're looking back to a time where we are thankful for Jesus' sacrifice on the cross, but at the same time, we're looking forward. Now let's look at the verse that explains this further to us. Right. It says, for every time you eat this bread and drink this cup, you are announcing the Lord's death until he comes again. So Apostle Paul, who wrote this passage, says that each time we celebrate the ceremony of the Lord's Supper, right, we are doing two things. On the one hand, we're remembering that we are thankful for the Lord who gave himself for us. But at the same time, we're remembering a promise that he didn't die to remain dead. He died and he rose again so that he can come back for us. So what does this mean for believers? Right? Every time we celebrate the Lord's Supper, we remind ourselves that God has provided us his salvation. We remind ourselves the promises that come when we are in covenant with God, right? When we are in covenant with God, we will receive his blessings, we will receive his protection, receive his grace, his love, so on and so forth. At the same time, we are claiming on a promise that he is coming back for us, right? He has risen and he's promised in his word, one day he's coming back for his church again. All right, so that's all we have for us in this lesson. Thank you.